Guys and girls, welcome to this drum tutorial. Today we are looking at Teenage Dirtbag by Wheatus. I've got a full transcription of this up at dukegrooves.com. Feel free to check it out. I have a shop now. It's fantastic. It's small, but it's growing. And you can find the transcription there. If you're feeling a bit cheap, I'll have notation on this video anyway, so you can just use that. But please consider checking it out because it helps me out a bit and it'll be easier for you as well. So, we start this track off with an intro. It's kind of an optional one, so I haven't included it in the transcription, but you will see the notation below here. We have this sort of warped drum beat going on. The reason I say this is optional because it actually starts in the verse. You probably won't play this live, and if you're playing it with a track, you'll probably miss it unless you're putting clicks in to begin with, as it comes straight in. But if you want to play it, we got kick on the 1 and the snare on the 2 and the and then we got 3 and 4 and. And that's going to bring us into our verse 1. Okay, verse 1. This is the part of the song that's going to take you the most time. It's a really cool drum beat. It's not too difficult, but it is going to take some time to nail. So we're going to break this right down. We're going to start off with single strokes between our hi-hat and our snare. For those of you, if you're not aware of what single strokes are, right, left, right, left, right, left. But we're going to split these up between the hi-hat and the snare. Most of you right-handed players will have the right hand up here, left hand on the snare, but if you're playing open-handed, that's cool too. It's going to be the same thing. So, the tricky part of this, for people not aware, is you've got to keep the hi-hat and the snare volume at the same volume. Now, the snare is inherently louder than a closed hi-hat, so we're going to bring the snares right down and the hi-hats up. If we're playing them in the same volume, they're going to sound like this. Not the same volume, the same... If we use the same dynamics for each one, so that I'm playing with the same force, that's what I mean. They're going to sound like that, but we want them to get them here. So we're going to use tap strokes, which start maybe an inch or two off the snare head on the snare drum. And we're going to keep our full strokes on the hi-hat. So sped up a bit, they'll sound like this. A little note on technique here for the snare drum. This is a whole lesson in itself, but I'm going to quickly run through it. We're going to release the back 3 fingers and catch. I'm not really putting any downward force into the snare drum. I'm just hearing the one note and then catching straight afterwards. This will take practice to nail. Can take a significant amount of practice for some people. But essentially, if I don't catch the stick, I'm going to release it. If I don't catch it straight afterwards, I'll just get more bounces. And then a dribble of the stick. So while it looks like I'm playing down with my wrist, I'm not. I'm just releasing my fingers and any tension in my arm. And then catch him. So putting this back in context with the hi-hat, loud notes here, 90 degrees roughly, bang, bang, bang. My recommendation is spend loads of time getting that right, because when we start adding the rest of it in, this is going to start wanting to become this, and it's something we've got to consistently monitor throughout the verses in this song. So, once you're happy with that, you can add your backbeat. The snare is going to come right across onto, sorry, the right hand is going to come right across the hi-hat onto the snare for the 2 and 4. Now monitor that snare drum because we don't want to hear this. Something smooth like this will do. Cool, right, happy with that. Add the kick drum, one in the one in the and the 3 in the and. It's going to sound like this. You do have the option of taking the backbeat out if you're struggling with that, trying to keep the volumes right. Just put the kick drum in with that shaker effect that we're creating by the hi-hat and the ghost notes on the snare. So that would just sound like this. Gain control over that, then add the backbeat back in. Cool, so that's our verse groove. We are going to play that, 13 times in the first verse, and then we're gonna get to our exit from the verse transitioning into the chorus. The last bar, which will be bar 16. We're gonna continue that groove all the way through the bar, and we're just gonna open the hi-hat up on the and of 4. We're gonna do this by dropping our heel. We're not gonna lift up, causing ourselves to be imbalanced. We're gonna keep our bass, drop the heel on the end of 4, which will cause our toes to pop up, causing the hi-hats to pop open. It's going to sound like this. We're then going to close it back down. Oh no, we're not going to close it down because the chorus is open, so we're going to leave it open and we're going to hit a crash on 1 for the chorus. So the transition will sound like this. Now I'll mention more about this, well I say more about this, I'll mention it again in the chorus part of the video. When we open that hi-hat up, we're not looking for a real wide open. Those of you learning on electronic kits, you've probably got closed and open and there's no nuance in between. On a real kit, there's loads of nuances in between. We're not looking for that where the cymbals are basically not really touching, they're just far apart vibrating on their own. We want to sizzle it. So it's more like that. From my eye line, whenever I've got a decent sounding open hi-hat, it doesn't actually look like it's open. I can't see a gap in between. Once I get to there, I can see this gap up here. So we want it here. That's going to bring us into our chorus. Let's hear that now, and then we'll break it down. Okay, chorus 1. This is going to be the same for chorus 2 as well, just a different exit, which I'll go through. The chorus is real basic in this. This is kick, kick, snare, kick, kick, snare. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Coming out from our verse 1, we've obviously got that open hi-hat. We're going to hit a crash on the 1 to mark it. We're going to play straight 8th notes with that sizzled open hi-hat. Again, not all the way open. We want a bit of control on it. For me, the perfect kind of sizzle, aside from that eye line thing I mentioned earlier, is that you don't want the decay of the cymbal to run out before you hit it again. If I'm here, you notice that sound runs out before I hit it again. I want to make sure that continues into the next shot. And then within that, you've got varying degrees of sound you can produce. But that's a lesson for another day. So, coming into chorus 1 out of the verse. We're going to play that through for a total of 7 bars, while the first bar, then 6 bars on the repeat. We've then got a cheeky little bar 2-4. It's a time signature change. If you're counting, this should not scare you at all. If you're not counting, don't be scared, you just need to count. So rather than counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and for the bar, we're just gonna play 1 and 2 and, exactly the same as the previous bars. And then we're gonna come into our transitional bar at bar 25, I think that says. Yeah, it does, 25. Where we're gonna hit snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, with the 8th note hi-hat on top. So that's gonna sound like this. Coming out of the, let's play 1 bar of the 6 repeat. 1 bar 2/4 into that. It's going to go like this. And then we're going to be back into verse 2. Let's look at the transition. It's going to sound like this. Okay, the transition. This is tricky. You're going for something really loud, really basic into our verse groove, which, like I say, is probably the hardest thing on this song. In fact, it's definitely the hardest thing in this song. So we've got to have a lot of control. This transition will take time. You're going to be practicing a tiny part of the music for a considerable amount of time, and that's how we learn songs. So what I recommend looping on this is if you skip ahead to bar 39, I believe. Yeah, so we're going to loop bar 25, which is our snare kick, snare kick, snare kick, into bar 39, which is our last drum beat, so our last bar of the verse, so that we can loop back into them again. So they're going to sound like this together. Now the purpose of this loop is to get us going from this big open beat to this controlled 16th note groove underneath. We want to shut our hi-hat up on 1. And then if you're having trouble getting this smooth, we want to then just add a note at a time. It's called a stepping stone procedure. Got this from Kim Plainfield, great book called Advanced Concepts. If you haven't got it, go get it, it's phenomenal. But we're going to stepping stone our way across this bar. So we add the 1, which was just the closed, and then we're going to add the E. Get comfortable with that. Add the and. Add the add the 2. Once you've got the 2, you should be able to play the bar through. Once you're happy with that loop, we've now got to get back to what we're going to transition to, and we're going to add the crash cymbal. The reason why I don't want to do it straight away is because our right hand is doing quite a lot in this transition. We're going to be going from our hi-hat open 8ths, we're going to hit the crash, the hi-hat, the snare, and back to the hi-hat, while we've also got to take care of those cheeky little ghost notes underneath. There's a lot of control going on here because our right hand's moving about playing loud notes, and our left hand cannot be interrupted or changed on that snare drum. So we're then going to take our loop from bar 25 to bar 26, and then I'd recommend going to 39 again, just so we can go back into that loop, back up at bar 25 again. It's going to sound like this. Again, you might need to start stepping stone proceduring across that, where your hand's just hitting the crash, closing the hi-hat on the 1 at the same time, and then just adding the crash and the ghost note snare, crash, ghost note snare, and then the and here, and so on and so forth throughout that bar. That's the transition. Let's look at chorus 2. Okay, chorus 2. Exactly the same as chorus 1. We've just got a different transition. At bar 48, rather than our snare kick, snare kick, snare kick, snare kick, we're going to hit snare, floor tom, and kick on the 1. We're going to leave a space for the and of 1, and then we're going to build up in 8th notes 2 and 3 and 4 and. So we're going to go. Except we're going to play that a little bit better because we want more of a crescendo. So a nice quiet first note, and then we're going to build up louder. This is quite simple in its essence. The tricky part here is to get everything to land at once. And this is a lifelong endeavor, I promise you that. But we want to avoid any major flamming. So we don't want anything like where my kicks are in front or if the snares are in front. We want to line up the hands together and we want to line up the feet with the hands, or rather the foot with the hands. And you can practice it like that. Take the dynamics up and down, make sure everything is smooth and together. So that's that bar. Coming out of, let's play one bar of the 6 repeats, into the 2/4 bar, into that bar, it's gonna sound like this. One thing to note, which I did forget, close the hi-hat on the 1 when you start playing this coming out of the previous bar. So we got the 1 and 2 and closed. So we got another foot to add to the other 3 here, another foot to add to another 3 limbs here. And that's going to build us up into our middle section. Let's hear that now. Okay, middle, first time round. We've got a brand new drum beat. We've got kicks on the 1 and the and we've got a kick on the and of 2 and the and of 3. Usual backbeat. Ignore the crashes for now, we're going to come to those in a second. So our basic drum beat is this. Once you're happy with that, we're gonna add our crashes. Now, I've put change of crashes on this if you've got 2. If you've just got 1, just use 1. It's fine, it's a crash cymbal. It's still gonna sound like a crash cymbal. I'm gonna use 2 for this demonstration because if you've got 2, it's way more fun. You get to make more noise. So we've got crash on the 1, crash on the and of 1, and then we're gonna hit the crash again on the and of 2. These all line up with our kick drums, so they're gonna sound like this. That first bar again. After the first bar, we're going to continue the crash cymbal that we hit on the and of the 2, but we're not going to play the crashes on the 1 and the and. So the first 3 bars are going to sound like this. That brings us into bar 52 for our first ending of this middle section. So this is exactly the same as chorus 1, snare kick, snare kick, snare kick, snare kick. So that whole part is going to sound like this. We're then going to go back round for another repeat, back to bar 49. Bam, 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 bam. 3 bars, then we're going to hit our second repeat, where the number 2 is. And we're going to get snare kick, snare kick, snare kick with a slightly different ending, 4E and on the snare. Kick and open. Same as before when we've opened the hi-hat on a 1-off. We're going to drop our heel on the and of 4, causing our toes to come open. So that full bar. And then we're going to land on a crash cymbal for the next bar. Plant the toes back down on the 1, so everything closes while the crash is being hit, and that's our middle section. One alternate way of playing this middle section, it's going to sound exactly the same, but if you want to be a bit more fancy, you can change the stickings of the crash cymbals. I think I do this in the demo. So rather than using your right hand to play all the crashes, you start to open up, left hand on the crash, right hand on the second crash, open-handed here, bom, bom, bam, bom, and then I'd probably use the right hand here. You can start playing around with things once you're comfortable, so that would look like this. Totally missed the crash cymbals for those next two bars, but you get the idea. Let's look at verse 3. Okay, verse 3. Nothing we haven't seen before, really. So we're going to hit that crash on the 1, where we close our hi-hat coming out of the middle section. We're then going to rest for 17 bars. Big, long build-up. Bar 75, we're going to start crescendo in our snare and floor tom. So we've got our bar of 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Bar of 2, 1 and 2 and. Just see the pattern emerging from the choruses on this. And then we've got another bar of 4 where we're going to add the kick drum underneath to start building this even further. So from bar 75, it's going to sound like this. And that's going to take us into our second coming of the middle section. Let's look at that now. Okay, our second middle section is exactly the same as the first time we played it, except we've got a different transition coming into our outro. We're actually going to set up the drum beat for the outro. This is a really cool device that many a drummer has used, including myself, where we sort of give a hint to what we're going to do later on in the song. It might be immediately, we might chuck it in way up at the end, but the last 4 notes of bar, what bar is that? That's going to be bar 85. Is going to set up our groove for bar 86 for the outro. So that last bar is going to sound like this. So what's happening here, our 8th notes are staying consistent on the 4 and here, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Snare on the 4, the kick on the E is going to come in between our hi-hats and the snare is going to come in between our hi-hats between the and the crash on the 1 of the next bar. This might take some practice for some of you, and we're going to practice it a lot more in the next section, but that's the basic element of it. Let's look at the outro. Okay, the outro. We're nearly there. We're on the home straight. We got some cool stuff going on this outro. So we set up our little kind of our motif, our little idea for this groove coming out of the second middle section. Bat und ga. We're now going to incorporate that into the groove. So we plays this on the 2 and the 4 as the main groove, and then we just got 1 and with a hi-hat and a kick. Crash cymbal with the first bar. It's going to sound like this. I recommend practicing that for a little while just to get that down, because we're going to come out of that, go back into it, and then come out of it again. So it's going to need to be nailed. Okay, let's look at bar 87, where things get interesting. So at beat 3, we've played up to beat 3 the same as our previous bar. Boom, boom, bat and gap. And then we got what is essentially a 4-stroke rough, which is that little 3, the triplets, the 32nd note triplets going into the 4. And then we got single stroke. So that bar is going to sound like this. One more. Now how we time this, nice and basic. It's just going to take some practice. So on the 3 and, we've got this open hi-hat and then close. This bit's fairly simple to get down. We're going to get that little plus sign, just means we're going to close it with the foot, but the X actually means we play it with the hi-hat, with the right hand as well. So when we've hit 3 and, our next note is going to be on the R. That's the first part of our 4-stroke rough. Now to get to the 4, we need to play 3 notes and land the fourth note on the 4. So we'll get a 4. It won't sound like that. Yeah. If you need to practice this as like an isolation exercise, literally do 1 E and da. We're essentially putting triplets to bridge the gap of the 16th note. Once you've got that, we're going to add 4 16th notes to finish. In terms of a little bit of finesse that's going on here, the triplets aren't generally as loud as the last 4 notes. We're going to sort of build those up to the last 4. It also makes them easier to play because as we limit the volume, we can increase the speed. Rather than keeping them all at the same volume, which, like I say, harder to play and doesn't sound as cool. We're going to go back into another bar of our previous groove, found at the beginning of the outro, starting with a crash. We've then got our kind of cheesy rock ending. This is brilliant. So we're going to have kick, kick, snare. We're going to close the hi-hats up on the snare. And that's got to be in time with that. We're not doing it before or after. Straight in time. Crash, crash, flam, kick, crash with a choke. Optional hi-hat pedal, which is in there. I think he's just silencing everything. And then we're going to hit 2 crashes. So we'll get... We're slowing down with this. There isn't any specific tempo that they're using. They probably recorded this in the same room, or they're just listening out for it and making sure everything gets together. We're going to gradually slow it. So coming out of the last bar. In terms of the choke, there is a little bit of a technique to it. All I'm doing, taking my normal grip, I'm just letting the stick roll back into my hand. So it comes from here. I'm gonna go underneath with my 4 fingers and squeeze with my thumb on top. Which means when I come out, I can just pop this back in like that. And that's the end of the song. Nearly took out the speaker. That brings us to the end. I hope you found it useful. My main point with this whole song is spend a considerable amount of time learning that verse beat. There's playing it and there's playing it, and a lot of people will play that verse beat with much louder snares. There's a big difference between that and this. Hope I've made that point clear. So, transcription at jewgrooves.com if you need it. Otherwise, enjoy your practice and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.